My name is Scott. I'm the sports nerd, along with Derek Laughlin from FantasyFootballManiacs.com with an X. And this is the Sports Nerds Network. Thank you very much for showing up or watching the replay if you're watching the replay on my YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to talk some NFL football. Basically, Derek is with us last week. Derek, how you doing tonight? Good to see you.
Doing good. Nice to see you, too.
Okay, and basically what he was doing last week was we were talking about the aftermath of the NFL draft. Specifically, we went through three divisions. We got a few more to go yet. We're going to kind of streamline it this week. We're going to talk about the first three rounds as opposed to going through the entire draft, because we don't feel like talking about people in like fifth, sixth, or seventh round that may not even be on these teams at that point in 6 months. There's no reason to talk about them. So Derek, last week we left off with the AFC North. You gave my Browns a grade of A, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I think we were doing numbers, and I gave him a 9.8. I thought Scooter's head was going to explode when he was saying in the chat. But like I said, when you're drafting first overall in each round, and you've accumulated all the draft capital you have there, to me, if they didn't get that, if they get an 8 with having that kind of draft capital, there's something wrong. They got three starters in the first round, and that's what you should be doing when you have that many picks. Now, whether that means they win 10 games this year, I don't think so. I mean, I think they're going to be closer to 4 or 5, but that's a big improvement over being a one-win team.
Yeah, and I'm a realist when it comes to my Browns. You know that. I mean, I don't have any high expectations. I don't expect them to be, not 8-8 this year. I expect them to be 5 or 6. 5 or 6 wins will be fine. And the schedule was conducive for them to get those wins, so I'm not really concerned about that. I just don't want to see them backsliding. And Hugh Jackson has had a lot of nice things to say about the offseason and the way these players are progressing, including the quarterbacks that are currently on the roster, including Brock Osweiler. God help us all. But for the most part, I don't expect miracles in year 2 of the Hugh Jackson regime. I do like the fact that I do know that Jimmy Haslam is going to give him give him a long leash, at least 3 or 4 years, to try to get some progress going, to see some improvement, and I think he's going to do it. So I'm going to stop talking about my Browns.
We could talk the whole show about the Browns. That's happened. but basically, let's move on from the AFC North, and let's go into the NFC North and see how they did the first 3 rounds. Is there a way to divide this up? There we go. I got NFL.com. Why don't I do this? I'll just put the link in the chat for anybody that wants to follow along. This is NFL.com's draft tracker. It's the one for the Bears, and then just up in the corner you can click it for whatever team you want and follow along.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Yep.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you very much. Okay, cool. All right, so round 1, of course, the big deal with the Bears is the big trade that occurred right off the bat after the Browns took Myles Garrett. The Bears give up 5 draft picks. Is that right? 5 draft picks or 3 draft picks?
It was 4 draft picks because they swapped the 3rd and the 2nd pick, and then they gave up a 3rd, a 4th, and a 3rd. So it was 4 picks for the 1 pick.
Yeah, and they end up getting Mitchell Trubisky out of North Carolina, who's had 13 games under his belt as a college quarterback. What did you think about that? Did you like that at all? I mean, you and I were on live when it happened, and we were like, our jaws hit the freaking table when that happened.
Well, I mean, I know I'm wearing the Green Bay stuff on the show, but I live in Chicago, and I interact with Bears fans all day. I have not heard one Bears fan that I've talked to that is happy about this trade. Everybody thinks they overpaid for him. I mean, this is a guy that in 2015 couldn't beat out Marquise Williams, who played on 2 practice squads last year and is not employed. Now, 13 games later, he was not only the 2nd pick in the draft, but worth 2/3 and a 4th to move up and get him. It was a terrible game of poker because I think they were bidding against themselves and they traded up when they didn't need to. And you got a guy that, who knows? He could end up being the best quarterback in the history of the league. He could be the biggest bust in the history of the league. We don't know until he gets on the field.
I compared him to the possibility of him being the next Ryan Leaf. But then again, Ryan Leaf had much more hype coming out of Washington State. There was much more promise for him, much more potential, much more expectations for him. No one's expecting anything out of Mitch Trubisky year 1. No. Mike Lennon's going to be the starting quarterback unless Mike Lennon's totally tanks it and or he gets injured during the training camp and preseason. Mike Glennon's, with the money they're paying him, he's going to be the starter. Plus, he's got NFL experience, even though it's been sitting behind Jameis Winston the last 3 years and a couple other no names before that. But still, I don't expect Trubisky to do anything next year. I expect him to ride the bench, be the backup, be a clipboard holder, and learn. And that's all I expect him to do next year with the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, he played most of his snaps in shotgun. The NFL does play about 50% shotgun now, so he's going to be fine there. But he's got to learn to take snaps from under center. He's got to learn to make reads. It's a big transition going from a spread offense out of the shotgun in college and reading NFL defenses. But like I said, he's got the arm strength. He's got the size. There were a lot of people that were high on him. He was the best rated quarterback prospect on a lot of people's boards. And nobody cares. In 5 years, if he's making the Pro Bowl every year and Aaron Rodgers has a rival in the division, they don't care how many third and fourth round picks they gave up to get him. Proof is in the evaluating these trades is 5 years after when the rookie contracts expire. Did you pick it up? Did you let him go? Is it a good player? Was it worth it? That's where they really get graded.
Right. All right. And then second round, they took Adam Sheehan, tight end out of Ashland. I never heard of this guy. He's 280 pounds. And according to, I'm reading right off of NFL.com, he's 280 pounds. He's athletic enough to run fast. Looks like he's played with middle school people. He's a special talent. You look at Sheehan's background, he can hoop. That's Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com. Did they need a tight end? That's my question.
That was the thing. I think they really needed wide receiver more. They needed some help at cornerback. They didn't draft one cornerback in this draft. Only one defensive back, and that was Eddie Jackson in the fourth round. And then they took the small school kid from Ashland, and then they took the guard Jordan Morgan from Cuztown. That blew a lot of Bears fans' minds that you got only 5 players in this draft, and 2 of them aren't even from major schools. So it was an interesting draft, to say the least.
They went 3 offense, 2 defense, and there's a toss-up as to say what side of the ball needed the most help. But clearly, they had the worst defense in that division last year. They got, even worse than the Lions' defense, for God's sake. It just, I don't know who's running the show up there, but if I was Fox, I'd be like, look, what are you doing to me here? I got no talent over here.
Well, there was reports that he didn't know they were going to trade for Trubisky. Glennon, they invited him to a draft party to promote the draft, and then they drafted his successor while he's at this public event. I just think this draft was mismanaged from beginning to end.
Absolutely.
And I think Ryan Pace better hope that Mitchell Trubisky is a Pro Bowl quarterback that can lead this team to the playoffs, because if he's not, he's going to be out of a job.
Yeah, Trubisky basically, you're looking at him, he's 6'2", 222 pounds. But he's not proven. Like you said, he couldn't beat out the starter of North Carolina for 2 years, for God's sake. And North Carolina is not necessarily a football juggernaut in the ACC, let alone the NCAA. So I don't understand that pick whatsoever. None. All right. So next up.
Well, we got to give it a grade. If I were going to give it a grade, we're doing number grades. I'd probably give it about a 6.0. I thought they gave up the 3rd and 4th round pick, which made it a failure. Too many small school players that aren't sure things. And when you can't trade a 3rd and a 4th round pick, takes 2 small school picks like that, and then be hoping that a quarterback can turn around a team that was drafting 3rd in the draft. I gave the Patriots a 5.5, and they didn't even get until the 3rd round. That kind of tells you where they were at as far as
right. And you know what? You give up 2 picks in this year's draft. You better make whatever picks you have left in this year's draft count, and they didn't.
No.
All right. That's Chicago. Who's next?
Why don't we just go alphabetically? So we'll go to Detroit.
Okay.
Their first round pick was linebacker Jared Davis. Good player. He missed a lot of time with an ankle injury, but he like Mike Mayock points out, he's today's NFL inside linebacker. They needed that. Good athlete has a chance to develop into a good player.
Yeah, they need defense. We know that. I mean, their offense, they've got a decent offense already with Matthew Stafford under center, and they've got they've got a couple of good running backs, a couple of good wide receivers. They definitely need offensive line help, but they also need defensive help because they couldn't stop anybody last year. Yep. And going linebacker with their first pick, that's someone that they can move around, cover tight ends or cover the slot receiver or maybe do a pass rush even, and that's a good pick for Detroit.
Yep, I thought so. The second round pick, Tease Tabor, I was not a fan of, and I know I value the combine a little more than you value that part of it, but he ran a 4.65 40 at his combine, and then you would think that would incentivize him to work out hard and try to at least get under 4.6 for his pro day, and instead he had a 4.75 at his pro day. Mm-hmm. So he was a disaster in the individual workouts. And that's why he fell to the second round. He had a body of work at Florida that would have made him a first-round pick, but then those slow 40 times are too much to overcome.
Well, Mike Mayock likes him. He says it's a good pick. So, I mean, again, they need all the defensive help they can get. So the more players they get on the defense side of the ball, the more the competition they're going to have, and they'll be able to put together a solid defense. I don't see it happening at this point. Because there's two other teams in that division, in my opinion, that are better than Detroit right now. But we'll see. And in the third round, they went wide receiver out of Northern Illinois, a kid named Kenny Golladay. What do you know about this kid? There's nothing on him on NFL.com.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch a ton of Northern Illinois games, even though that's not that far away. But he's 6'4", 218 pounds, and I think that kind of makes sense with what they have because Golden Tate's a smaller receiver. Marvin Jones is over 6 foot, but he's not huge. They're losing Anquan Bolden, who is a red zone threat. So you're drafting this guy, hoping to give yourself a bigger target in the red zone, so that they can play well there. So I mean, time will tell if he can develop or not.
Yeah. All right. And so, what kind of grade do you give Detroit for their draft?
I wasn't a huge fan of it. I mean, I'd probably give it about a 7.0. I think Davis could become a good linebacker. I don't like Tabor. Whether he can run faster or not, to me, isn't the point. It's the fact that he's interviewing for a job, runs a horrible combine, and then follows that up by doing worse. So that screams work ethic problems. That screams conditioning problems. And I didn't think they got a lot of value out of the second round pick. So I'd give it a 7.0.
Okay. All right. Next up, your boys. Green Bay Packers. If you're going alphabetically, Green Bay's up next. Yep. And they took Kevin King in the first round. I mean, it was the 33rd pick overall, which means it was the last pick in the round. And they took Kevin King out of Washington.
I love this pick. He was one of my favorite players in the draft. 6'3", 200 pounds, long, lanky corner. That's somebody they need to match up against Julio Jones and Des Bryant, who killed them in the playoffs last year. So that was a good pick to me.
Yeah, last year, the secondary for Green Bay really hurt them bad. I mean, Atlanta torched them in the NFC Championship game. Green Bay, he just couldn't stop anybody. I remember time after time on you on this show lamenting how bad that defense was and just how they couldn't stop anybody, especially the secondary. All right, in the second round, they went with Josh Jones out of NC State, another defensive back, a safety. He's 6'1", 220. He can put, again, they're bringing in competition. They're bringing in players that hopefully they can compete and make that defense better.
Well, they have Clinton Dix, and now you get a 6'1", 220-pound guy that you can line up at safety. You can line up at corner. It's just what they needed. I mean, who knows if both these guys are going to develop into good players. Just to get on a little bit on a tangent, I want to talk about something that Nick and I were talking about on the Ghost Ship. There was this guy called Western Chief that wrote an article for SB Nation, and he looked at the 2005 to the 2014 draft, and there were 2,465 players that were non-kickers drafted in those years. Only 629 of those drafted became starters for at least half of their NFL careers.
That's what is that, 50%?
25.
Oh, 25%. Okay.
Yeah, 25. I mean, and that isn't even good starters. That doesn't mean they're, Darrelle Revis or Richard Sherman.
Right, they're not Hall of Fame players. They're not long-term guys. I mean, you're probably going to have 5 or 10% of those players become Hall of Famers at the most. So I mean,
not even that.
Not even that. Yeah, so
1% of the 1% of the players that have ever played in the league are in the Hall of Fame. If you
1%.
get one Pro Bowler out of a draft class, you're doing pretty good. And if you get a couple serviceable starters, you're fine. So I know Green Bay needs secondary help, but I think just to assume you put in Kevin King and he's going to have 7 interceptions this year. Josh Jones is going to have 100 tackles, and Martavius Adams is going to shore up the middle of the defense. I mean, if 2 of these guys can even make an impact for this team this year, that's a good draft.
Yeah, and then that leads to my next question. What did you think of Martavius Adams getting picked?
I like him, and Oliver Crawford, who was on the show last year, and was talking to me about him, and he said, "You're going to love this guy." Oliver's in Alabama, so he watches a ton of SEC football, and said this guy's just an absolute beast in the middle.
All right. Well, what kind of grade do you give your Packers?
I probably give them an 8.0. I think they got a really good value in the second round, a guy that could have been a first-round pick. Jones, I think, is good value at safety. They gave themselves a couple other chances. They drafted 3 running backs to create some competition at the running back spot because I don't think Ty Montgomery's a featured back. I think he's a great scat back, and he can handle 15 touches a game as long as some of them are receptions. But, I give them an 8.0. I think they set themselves up nicely that if they hit their picks, they can really upgrade their defense.
Yeah, and just as an overall looking at this, they did take Jamal Williams out of BYU. That was a high-profile pick they took. And they took Devontae Mays out of Utah State. For a team that needs running back help, they did take 2 running backs in this draft. I don't know that that's going to be the end-all, be-all for them. But, I mean, I don't know that Montgomery is the answer either. Who did they pick up in free agency that I'm forgetting?
Well, they re-signed Christine Michael, and then they cut him.
Right.
And they actually got a 3rd running back because there was also Aaron Jones out of Texas El Paso.
I just saw him, yes. Right. Yeah, I just saw that.
And so that's what happened is they had Ty Montgomery. They re-signed Christine Michael, but then they drafted these 3 running backs, decided they didn't need Michael, and they released him.
And if I'm not mistaken, Michael's gone back to Seattle. Is that not correct? Did he go back to Seattle?
I think Seattle has so many running backs on their roster right now. Let me look and make sure. Nope, he's still unsigned according to Roto.
All right. Okay. All right. I didn't know. I thought I had a rumor he may have gone back to Seattle.
He visited the Patriots, but he hasn't caught on any place yet because the Patriots had another team that just seems to be stockpiling running.
Yeah, they need more. They need good players in New England, I'm sure.
Did you see they gave that tender to LeGarrette Blount?
Yeah. No, I didn't see that.
So let me get this on Roto World. They extend a $1.1 million tender to Blount. So if he signs that before July 22nd, they can. That's going to be his salary. Otherwise, if he signs with somebody else, they get a draft pick out of it as long as it's before July 22nd. After that, he can only negotiate with the Patriots through week 10 of the season. So the Patriots are trying to get a draft pick is what I think they're trying to do.
Sounds like the deal that Ben Bishop just got with the Dallas Stars again because the Kings let him go and he went to the Stars and he can't negotiate with anybody else before July 1st other than the Dallas Stars.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I'm going to stay on Green Bay here just for a second, okay?
Sure.
Because we got plenty of time. We got 40 minutes yet.
Sure.
Where do you think the running back situation, because you're a Green Bay fan, where do you think they're going to go as far as a running back situation in Green Bay? Because they've got great receivers. They've got the quarterback of a Hall of Fame quarterback, first ballot. Yes, they need secondary help, but where do you think, in order for Green Bay to maintain control of that division, they need some running help? And I don't know that Montgomery is the answer.
Well, here's what I would say is let's go back to 2010 when they won the Super Bowl. Ryan Grant was injured pretty early in the year, and they had a 6th-round pick from the University of Buffalo that was hurt most of the year that they just plugged in at the end of the season, and he helped carry him to a Super Bowl that year, and that player was James Starks.
Okay.
And so I think when you're a team like Green Bay where you can pass the ball so much and you have first-ballot Hall of Fame quarterback play, you don't need to draft a running back in the first round of the draft. And so I think they set themselves up nicely because Ty Montgomery showed at times that he can be a good running back, that he can be a receiver out of the backfield, that he can line up in the slot. And so what they did is they took 3 players in Williams, Jones, and Mays that they think might be able to develop into guys they could use. Mays is 5'11" and 230. That's a big guy that can maybe be a goal line guy. Jones is 5'9" and 208 pounds. He's smaller running back. Williams 6'0", 212. They gave themselves a nice stable of running backs so that hopefully one of these three guys can work out in an offense where they're not going to be keyed on. So I think they did what they needed to do. I think one of these three guys is going to work out with Montgomery, and it'll be serviceable.
Yeah, and just to tag on it, hit me. Eddie Lacy signed with Seattle. That's who I was thinking of.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was big news over the weekend about his garage sale in Green Bay too. I don't know if you saw that or not. It was pretty funny.
That he wasn't at.
Right, but
Seattle had a half price deal on hamburgers, and so he couldn't leave Seattle.
So it just tells me you're not sorry to see Eddie Lacy go somewhere else.
Our nickname for him on the Maniacs last year for the Ghost Ship was Private Pile. From the movie Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
I mean, he just ate his way out of Green Bay. He was 260 pounds in 2015, and then he lost the weight on P90X, but they said he gained a lot of it back during the season and was just hurt. I just don't think he's in a state of mind where he can put the food down and be a competent running back. I don't think he's going to do anything in Seattle.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. And you gave Green Bay an 8, you said?
I give them an 8.0, yeah.
Okay.
I think it was above average. I think they did. I think they got great value at the top of the draft, and they did what they needed to do with the running backs.
Okay. All right. So next up, we got the Minnesota Vikings, and they waited until they didn't have a first-round pick, but they made the most of what they did in the second round, meaning they took Dalvin Cook out of Florida State. That was a great pick in my mind. They needed somebody to step up. They need someone to take over that running back position. With AP gone to New Orleans, no less, they needed that star running back, and I think they got it with Dalvin Cook. I think he was the second best running back in this draft.
Yeah, that's what I had kind of thought too. And he's a first-round talent that he fell into the second round because some of the off-the-field issues. But on tape, he was as explosive as any player in this draft. So I think that's good value in the second round, even though they signed Latavius Murray. That was an area of need. So that was a great value pick to me.
Absolutely. And they got some offensive line help with their third-round pick, Pat Elflein out of Ohio State, which also they needed because Bradford needs all the help he can get back there because he was getting killed. Second or third game in, he was getting killed because the offensive line wasn't protecting him. Not to mention the fact Minnesota's defense fell apart after such a stellar. They were 5-0 their first. They started off 5-0, and then all of a sudden their defense all of a sudden fell apart. So
playing with an offense that bad is exhausting, and yes, I think that's what happened.
And looking at the rest of their draft. They did pick up a couple of wide receivers. They got a tight end, Bucky Hodges out of Virginia Tech. I don't think any big splash players other than Dalvin Cook came out of this draft from Minnesota. But it's obvious to me just by looking at it, they wanted to improve that offense. And hey, Jen, and I think they've upgraded the offense a little bit. They actually have more than a little bit with Dalvin Cook. But they got Rodney Adams out of South Florida, wide receiver, Bucky Hodges out of Virginia Tech, tight end, Stacy Coley, 6 foot, out of Miami. They picked up 3 receivers, but I don't see any one of these guys making a huge impact in camp or on the field.
No, probably not. They also signed Michael Floyd, I believe I saw today. And so if you add Floyd with Diggs, with Adam Thielen, and Treadwell, who they drafted in the first round last year, probably none of these guys are going to make an impact. I think the one to watch is Bucky Hodges.
Okay.
He played at Virginia Tech and just had a fantastic combine. I want to say he ran the 40 and the 4.5s. He's 6'6", not much of a blocker. He's going to probably be a off the line of scrimmage type tight end, but at 6'6", 257 and moving that fast, if he can get even decent quarterback play out of Bradford, that's a guy that could at least be a red zone threat. I don't think he's have relevance, but he could have relevance for them. Yeah,
red zone or even up the middle too. My thinking is, you add a guy like who'd you mention he picked up in the offseason? I can't remember. All of a sudden, my brain just went.
Michael Floyd?
Michael Floyd. Isn't he on the back end of his career, though?
Well, he's had some problems with injuries. He's had some problems with conduct and decision-making, but he's only 27 years old at this point. And he's a 6'2", 220-pound receiver that when his head is right can be a great red zone threat and can stretch the field. This was a first-round pick that a lot of people thought could be a star there. So I don't know. I think it's a good flyer for him. They only gave him a 1-year deal for $1.5 million, so that tells you where he's at this point in his career.
Yeah, he's got to prove himself, basically what he has to do. So, all right. So, what kind of grade are you going to give Minnesota's draft?
I'd give them a similar grade to Green Bay. I think I'd give them an 8.0 because they had the unfortunate situation that their draft pick was in Philadelphia because of the Bradford trade, but they still came away with a first-round running back in Cook. They signed the tackles in free agency, so adding Elfine at center was a big move for somebody that could help right away. Hodges, I thought, was a good value in the 6th round, and they added enough other pieces that I think it's got a chance to be a pretty good draft for them.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the AFC South.
All right. That would be Houston to start off with then.
All right. And now, of course, Houston, their big splash pick of the first round was with number 12 overall, Deshaun Watson. This is a team that gave up Brock Osweiler and gave up a draft pick to go along with it, a second-round pick to the Browns for next year. But they got the guy they wanted. They actually traded up with the Browns to get Deshaun Watson. He's probably, by many people, saying he's the best quarterback in the draft and most ready to play right out of the gate as far as the quarterback class is concerned. But, again, the build-up to this draft was the big talk was none of these quarterbacks are ready to play right now. They're not NFL ready. They're not a Peyton Manning, or they're not a Drew Brees, or they're not someone who's ready to play just right out of the gate. Deshaun Watson is close, but he's not quite there yet. I think Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, has the best situation in that he has a team that is looking for that star quarterback to take them over the top because they've got a playoff primed and ready team with that defense.
Well, here's the thing: let's look at last year going into the draft. Would you have said Dak Prescott was the most NFL-ready quarterback in that draft? No. Nobody thought he was. They didn't think he played in a system that was conducive to that. He ended up being the most NFL-ready quarterback in the draft. He got start because of the Tony Romo injury. He was slow to start the season, but he just improved as he had the reps.
No, but it also helps to have the best offensive line in the NFL too, to get all that protection, so he can have more time to read defenses. Yeah.
Yep, and to have Ezekiel Elliott with you, to have Des Bryant with you, it was a good situation for him. And I don't think Watson's situation is quite as good as that.
No, it's not.
But there are some things that are similar about it. You have Lamar Miller, who has shown he can be a 1,000-yard running back. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's been a top 10 wide receiver. You have Will Fuller, who showed at times last year he could be explosive, the good tight ends, the number 1 ranked defense, where he's not going to be asked to score 30 or 40 points a game to win. He just needs to go out there and manage the game, not make mistakes, and keep the Texans in the game. So I don't know if I like giving up a first-round pick next year for him. I think you got to be pretty sure he's going to be your quarterback for the next 10 years if you're going to do something like that. But he's in a great situation, and he has the best chance to start right away given what's on the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. They went linebacker in round 2 with Zach Cunningham out of Vanderbilt. He's 6'3", 234.
He's a player that I think fell to the first round or second round because of the combine. He didn't have quite the speed that people were hoping for there, and it caused him to drop. But he had a great career at Vanderbilt, good starter, and he's not going to be asked to be the star of this defense to lead him to the playoffs. He just needs to be a piece that can help him, and he's definitely good enough to do that.
No, J.J. Watt is J.J. Watt's the star of that defense, and then of course when you have what's his face on the other end, it doesn't. When Clowney had a breakthrough season last year, his 3rd year in the league after all those injury problems he had the first 2 seasons, he actually had a pretty stellar season last year and took over that defensive line when JJ went down.
Well, and that's why you have to wait to evaluate these drafts, because after Bortles had the 35 touchdown pass season and Clowney had been hurt his first 2 years, there was a lot of people saying the Texans had made a huge mistake by passing on Bortles and going with Clowney. And now, just a year later, it's the other way around. I think you're pretty happy you have Clowney and not Bortles. So
yeah, Bortles is only good for fantasy football because he plays catch up on it, because he's playing from behind in the fourth quarter. And that's garbage time football for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
In the 3rd round, they went Deontay Foreman out of Texas, running back, 6 foot 233.
He probably takes Lamar Miller from a running back 1 to a running back 2 because he's a 6', 230-pound back that's going to steal some goal line work. And Miller does need less touches. He didn't do well with 260 touches. He'd probably be better off having 200 to 225, more of a receiving role, and have Foreman come in and give him a spell. But I think it takes Miller down to a running back 2 because he's going to lose some touches.
All right. And what kind of grade are you going to give the Houston Texans?
I'd probably give him about a 7.0. I don't know if Watson is going to be quite ready to play this year, and I don't like that they don't have a first-round pick next year. And some of the other pieces were okay, but I think all in all it was pretty average draft.
All right. Well, next up we got Indianapolis next.
Yep.
And before we get started, I'm looking at Indianapolis's draft, and they have one offensive lineman in this entire draft. They had 8 picks and took one offensive lineman the entire draft. In fact, they only took 2 offensive players total from round 1 through round 5, which they had picks in. What the hell is Jim Irsay thinking?
Well, okay, let's start with who they did pick. So when Malik Hooker was there, that was the best safety on the board. That was probably one of the top 4 players in the draft. He fell because of all the shenanigans that happened with wide receiver and quarterback in the first 12 picks. I mean, I would not have thought it was a good idea to take Cam Robinson at that spot and leave Malik Hooker on the board. So sometimes the board makes you do things that you didn't anticipate doing, and I think that's what happened there. The second round, Quincy Williams, it's hard to argue. They need secondary help, too. They have not had a great secondary in the last few years. And he was I saw mocks that had him going in the first round, too. So I thought they got excellent value there.
And then third round, they went Terrell Basham, defensive end out of Ohio, not Ohio State, Ohio. 6'4", 269. You know, he's a good football player, but again, it didn't address the need they have in offensive line. Andrew Luck is going to get killed again this season.
Well, they drafted Kelly in the first round last year at center, and they drafted, I think, LaRaven Clark in the second round to play tackle. So that you do have 2 picks that you took last year that you're developing. Kelly was starting right away. Clark has kind of been a work in progress. So I would have liked to have seen him got a lineman high up, but this was one of the worst offensive line classes in the history of the league.
Agreed.
The first one didn't go until 20th, and I don't know if you make your team better by taking bad offensive linemen high in the draft. So all in all, I think they did okay.
Well, they did take an offense. They did take an offensive. The lineman they did take is an offensive tackle from USC, 6'8", 353, Zach Banner. What do you know about this kid?
Well, he's a big, massive run-blocking specialist, as Mark Durgan said, that played on a great college offense, 6'8", 353 pounds. So you're adding somebody with some size to the team. I don't think in the fourth round that's a guy that's going to be ready to start. I think you're hoping in a couple of years he develops. I would question at that size, is he going to have the speed to handle edge rushers in the draft? Wouldn't be surprised if he's a run blocking specialist at that size that he moves to guard at some point.
Yeah. Now I know this is the 4th round pick, but Marlon Mack out of South Florida. Me living in this area, I followed South Florida pretty in depth this year. Marlon Mack is a sleeper. He could end up being a good. I mean, he's only 5'11", granted, but he's almost 6 foot tall. But he's 213 pounds. That kid could be a sleeper in this draft as far as a running back is concerned. Yeah, he had a lot of highlights. I had a lot of good games down here in South Florida for the Bulls. I just put that out there. Keep your eye on Marlon Mack, because he could be a difference maker.
Yeah, I think in fantasy, if you're looking for a sleeper back to draft at the end of the draft, Gore's in his 30s. I know we keep saying that he doesn't have much time left, and every year he still has a good season, but eventually he's going to be too old to play, and he's going to break down, and that could be this year, and that could make Matt a sleeper. Right.
All right. Next up, we got the Jackson. I mean, what kind of grade did you give this team?
I'd probably give him about an 8, because I think Hooker to me was my second favorite player in the draft, other than Garrett that went to Cleveland, and I thought they got good value later in the draft. It'd been a little higher if they could have found an impact lineman, but you only got so many picks in this bad offensive line draft. So I think they actually did pretty good.
Okay. Now we move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who got the first running back in the draft in Leonard Fournette with the 4th pick overall. 6 foot 240 out of LSU. He was clearly the best back in this draft. I think Fournette fits very nicely with Jacksonville in their offense. It'll take some pressure off of Bortles because it'll open up that running game, which they didn't have last year or the last 2 years for that matter.
Yep. At that size, he's a candidate for 300 carries this year, especially with a defense that's up and coming and a team that wants to play more physical. I don't think he's going to be a high running back one because I don't think they have a good enough offensive line for that. But if he sees 300 carries, he's going to be on the low running back one side because you only have to average 3.5 yards per carry to get to 1,000 yards when you're getting that many carries.
Yeah. Do you think his injury history is going to come into play?
I mean, he was healthy 2 years ago when he just absolutely dominated the NCAA. Last year, I wonder, could he have played through some of those injuries? But because he knew he was going to be a top 5 pick, he decided to take it easy coming back. There was nothing that says to me there was a career concerner there that they should have to worry about. Any player can get hurt, but nothing that I see that should carry over to this year. Okay.
Second round, they went Cam Robinson, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Again, Alabama's getting a lot of publicity with their offensive linemen getting picked in this draft. Granted, it wasn't a great draft, like we said. It wasn't a great draft for offensive linemen, but this is a big boy, 6'6", 322. Yeah. And he's going to be able to protect Blake. I don't know if he's a right tackle or left tackle, but either way, it says here that Mayock says he plays right tackle, so he can play right or left. Yeah. Depending on where he fits better, that's where he's going to be put in, and that's good news for Blake. Again, it gives him time to cut down on those interceptions because that's his biggest detriment right now is Blake's ability to cut down on the interceptions.
Yeah, for sure. And at 34 in the draft, if you can get a starting tackle at 34, you're pretty happy with that. So I think that's a good pick.
It was the top of the second round. It's not a bad pick. Round 3, the 4th pick in the 3rd round, they went Dwayne Smoot, a defensive end out of Illinois. He's 6'3", 264. Again, and Brian Billick says you can't have enough defensive linemen. Well, this is coming from the former head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. If anybody knows defense, Brian Billick knows defense. So
it's not a sexy pick, but it's a guy that shores up your run defense. He makes tackles. He's somebody that helps you win games. Of the rest of these, the only one I think of any note to mention is Day Westbrook, the receiver out of Oklahoma. Supposedly he got kicked out of a team meeting during the combine. Probably a 1st or 2nd round talent that had 7th round attitude. So that's why he ended up in the 4th round. But if he can get his head on straight and work hard, he doesn't need to be a star there. And with Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns drawing a lot of attention, maybe he's somebody that makes an impact.
Right. Okay. And what kind of grade are you going to give Jags?
I'll probably go in between Houston and Indianapolis and give it a 7.5. I think with Fournette, they kind of stumbled into that. They had the 4th pick in the draft, and that was the best available player there. And Cam Robinson, I thought, was good in the 2nd round, but I didn't think they got a lot of impact in rounds 3 through 7, at least not as much as Indy did.
All right, and next up we have the team that you and I both picked to win the division last year, which fell flat on their face.
We both picked Jacksonville.
That's right. I took Jacksonville. I apologize. We took Jacksonville. You're right. I know what I was thinking. I thought Tennessee was going to be better than they were. But we go with Tennessee Titans. And they get in the 1st round, the 5th pick overall, Corey Davis, wide receiver out of Western Michigan. There was a lot of talk about this kid coming into the draft.
Yeah, a big kid, 6'3", 209, can be a wide receiver 1, has the speed to be a deep threat, the size to be a red zone threat, and he's got Marcus Mariota there. I think he's a wide receiver 2 in fantasy this year with wide receiver 1 upside.
Well, when you got Mariota as your quarterback, you're automatically going to be a big target. So he's going into a good situation with that offense. They had another pick in the 1st round. They went Andre Jackson out of USC, quarterback, 5'10", 186.
Little small is the only thing. I think at 5'10", 186, he's going to probably have to play the slot.
Right.
And I don't know. The slot corners are on the field 60% of the time, though. So if he ends up being a great slot corner, that's not bad. But I think 5'10", 186, you're not going to line up against Julio or Dez or Demaryius Thomas or some of these bigger receivers and do a lot at 5'10" against those guys. So that's why don't think he projects as a outside corner against top receivers. I think he's a slot corner.
All right, and then they had 2 picks in the 3rd round, the first one of which was Taywan Taylor, another wide receiver out of Western Kentucky.
Yeah, and Danielle Jeremiah compared him to Derek Mason because of the toughness, the quickness, and the speed he possessed. Right. If they get Derek Mason in the 3rd round, they're going to be doing cartwheels. That would be fantastic.
Well, and again, these guys are going to if 2 out of 5 of these guys make it, it's a good draft. So, and then finally with the third in the 3rd round, they went with Jonnu Smith, a tight end out of Florida International, which doesn't get a lot of play, but he's 6'3", 248.
I like it. I like it because Delaney Walker's there and he's getting older, so you get a small school guy that's a really solid player that gets to learn from a good player and maybe develops into something in a couple years.
And backing up Delaney Walker is not a bad gig at all. I mean, he can learn a lot from Delaney Walker, who's a perennial Pro Bowler himself. He's one of the best tight ends in the NFL right now, in fact. So, all right. And what kind of grade are you going to give Tennessee?
I'd probably give them around an 8.0. I think Davis, they added an absolute impact player on offense, which is what they needed. Jackson was a 1st-round grade and gives them a good slot corner. If any of these other position players work out or they get a sleeper later in the draft, it has a chance to be a great draft. So I think they're right there with what Indy did. Okay, all right. Now we go to the NFC South, beginning with the Atlanta Falcons, the defending NFC champions. Yeah, their 1st-round pick was Takaris McKinley out of UCLA. He's an 3-4 outside linebacker or 4-3 end, and he's fast. And he just fits right into what they've been trying to do is draft fast players. I think their front 7 was the fastest front 7 in the NFL last year, and so it's a player that fits in with their scheme. Mm-hmm. And then they didn't pick again until the 3rd round. They took Duke Riley, a linebacker at LSU. There's a trend here. They actually went 50-50, but in the earlier rounds, they went defense, which in the course, as we all saw the Super Bowl, the defense let them down, being up 28-3 at the half and then losing. Actually, 28-3 at the start of the 4th quarter and then losing to the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and their defense just let them down. Definitely. I mean, they couldn't get off the field, and it kept the offense in a funk, and then it just was something that kind of spiraled out of control. So it doesn't surprise me that in the first 2, their first 2 picks that they went defense, because the offense was not a problem last year. Not at all. Not at all. You see a Super Bowl hangover for the Falcons, similar to the Panthers? I do. I mean, I think the Buccaneers put themselves in a position to win this division. We'll talk about them in a bit. Cam Newton, I thought, had some injury issues last year. He's had a shoulder surgery, and they added some weapons. And I think they could. One player to watch late in the draft. I know Atlanta doesn't need running backs, but Freeman's in a contract year, I believe, and Coleman has had durability issues. Brian Hill out of Wyoming, that's somebody to watch. He's just a true power back, and that offense, that could be a sleeper if they had some injuries. Okay, and what kind of grade are you going to give Atlanta? I'd probably give them a 7.0. I mean, McKinley is a nice player in the 1st round, but Riley, he was okay, but he's 6 foot 232. I think he's going to need a couple years to develop, and I didn't see anything great at the end of the draft. So I think they did what they needed to, but probably just a 7.0. All right, next up in the South is going to be the Carolina Panthers, and with the first pick in their first pick in round 1, they went actually the only pick, the 8th pick overall. They went with Christian McCaffrey. I like this kid out of Stanford. I like him a lot. He's 5'11", 202. There's a lot of hype about him. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, so he could be a slot receiver. He could be a tight end. I mean, they can pretty much put him anywhere that he can make an impact. Wasn't he their 2nd round pick? He was 1st round. Christian McCaffrey was their. I think he was their 2nd round pick because the 2nd round pick is the exact same as the 1st round pick. It was the most duplicative pick I saw in the draft because McCaffrey. I'm joking. I'm looking at the screen. You're going, what are you talking about? You're just messing with me now, Derek. I'm just messing with you. I mean, McCaffrey, I loved him, but you take a 5'11", 202-pound player that can play outside receiver, slot receiver, or running back. Projections are running back that lines up at some receiver. And then in the 2nd round, you take Curtis Samuel, right, who's a slot receiver that can play running back. Yeah, we talked about that in the shows.
What are they doing? They took McCaffrey, and now they're taking Samuel. What are they doing? It's the same guy. I mean, we did talk about that during the show. So,
Yeah.
I'm on the same page with you there. I don't understand that second round pick either. And then they go where they need to go. They get offensive line help with Taylor Morton and with the 64th pick overall. But that McCaffrey, and then they go Samuel. They could have done a lot better with that pick in the second round.
Well, that's the thing, is their secondary was so bad last year, and this was one of the deeper cornerback drafts in ever.
Well, especially when they lost Josh Norman in the offseason last season. There was an obvious huge drop off in their secondary when Norman was no longer there.
Yeah. And so they didn't address corner until the 5th round, 152nd pick when they took Corn Elder. And so that's kind of my issue with this team is, I love that they had a dynamic offense. And from a fantasy perspective,
right,
you love what they did there. But from building an NFL roster perspective, I think their secondary is still pretty suspect. And when you got the quarterbacks you have in that division, you need as many good corners and secondary pieces as you can, or you can get rolled on.
Well, they only took two defensive players the entire draft, so that bodes like, what are you thinking?
And Harrison Butker is a player to watch because Graham Gano had an off year, so they definitely brought in some competition, and he's entering a contract year, so that'll be interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah, for Georgia Tech, yeah, I see that. Yeah. All right, so what kind of grade you giving the Panthers?
Most of the teams I kind of got muddled all together, and I'd say they're kind of in that 7 to 7.5 range. They added 2 impact players, and if McCaffrey and Samuel are a juggernaut in the league and they can figure out a way to use both those guys. One thing I did read is that they were really impressed with the Patriots, how many checkdowns they gave to James White and Deion Lewis, and they want to add that to Cam Newton's repertoire so he's not getting hit so much, and they're giving it to playmakers in space. So if that works and these guys do well, then this has a chance to be an A draft that takes them to another level. But I don't think they addressed it secondary, and I thought that was a redundant pick.
Yeah, I agree. All right, and going on from there, we go next off to the New Orleans Saints. This is a team that needed defensive help really bad because their defense couldn't stop anybody. They got a great offense that can put up a lot of points, but their defense always gives up. They give up a lot of points too.
Yep.
And at their first 4 picks, they took 2 defensive players. They took 2 offensive players. The first pick for them was the 11th pick overall, Marshawn Lattimore out of Ohio State. Go Buckeyes.
I mean, this was the best corner in the back in the draft, and he fell. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had gone 3 to the Bears, and he fell to 11. So to me, this was an absolute steal. You're adding one of the fastest running backs. Mayoc's saying he thinks he could become a key to lead down the road.
Nice.
You get a key to lead in this draft, you're going to be pretty happy if you're New Orleans. That's
again, it's an Ohio State defensive player. They put out the all-star players in Ohio State like it's no tomorrow. The second pick in the first round, which was the 32nd they got from the Patriots, was Ryan Ramczyk, an offensive tackle out of Wisconsin. You should know this about this kid from Wisconsin.
Mauler, great fundamentals. Like they said, a day one starter. That's a great pick at the end of the first round. That helps their offensive line.
And that'll help their running game.
Yeah.
In the second round, they only had 1 pick in the second round. That was when they put Marcus Williams out of Utah, safety, 6'1", 202.
Yeah, I think he was a guy, and I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but I thought he was somebody that had like 8 interceptions against only 44 targets. He was somebody that quarterbacks avoided at Utah, and he made the most of his opportunities. So that was a good pick too. He has the potential to really help the secondary.
All right, they had 3 picks in the third round, so we're going to stay a little longer with the Saints here.
Sure.
They got Alvin Kamara with the 67th pick overall, 3rd pick in the third round, running back out of Tennessee. Do the Saints? I mean, they don't have a strong running game because they don't have the offensive line. It's a pass-happy offense down there. This kid's 5'10", 214 out of Tennessee.
One of my favorite players in the draft. I had him going early in the second round. If one of those other 3 running backs doesn't become the star running back of this draft, this might be the guy that does. I think it's a great fit, smart pick. They got good value there.
And I understand. I'm looking at what Charles Davis is saying about him. He's fast like Reggie Bush out of the backfield. He can catch the ball and really get some yardage in some open space. So that's a good pick for him. With the 12th pick in the third round, they went Alex Anzalone 6'3" linebacker out of Florida. I don't like the Gators, so I don't know nothing about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that can play on passing downs because he can rush the quarterback and cover. So it gives him a body at linebacker that can help out on passing downs early in his career.
And then finally, with the 39th pick in the third round, 103 overall, which is a compensatory selection from the Patriots, Trey Hendrickson, outside linebacker for Florida Atlantic.
He's a guy that rose during the East-West Shrine game, and Mayock loved him. Has a whole paragraph here about him. So again, they cannot get enough impact players on defense. So they took some calculated shots, and if even two of these guys can make an impact, if Marshawn Lattimore makes an impact, and then any of these other guys they took in the second and third round do, that's going to dramatically help their defense.
Okay. And what grade are you giving New Orleans on this draft?
9.0.
Yeah, it was a good draft.
I love
it was
this
a good
draft
draft
for him.
Yeah.
They could have found – I think Lattimore and Ramczyk were as safe as any players in the draft. So both their first-round picks have the potential to work out. Kamara, I think, could be a star. And if any of these other defenses go good, I think they could have had a top 5 draft easily.
I mean, it's not going to get in the division next year, but it's going to make them better than they were last year.
Yeah, and they're not that far away if Breeze can still play because they got a 5,000-yard offense there. They can't stop anybody, and if they can run the ball better with Ramczyk and Kamara, and if Lattimore can help them cover the other team's best receiver, they don't need to hold teams to 17 points a game.
Right. All right. Next up, we're going to go to Tampa. My team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my second team, my backup team, and they had. Had 4 picks in the first three rounds. They go O.J. Howard with the 19th pick overall, which was amazing he lasted that long to begin with.
It was the most athletic tight end in this draft. I saw mocks that had him going 6 to New York. He fell because of all the things that happened with the quarterbacks and receivers in the top 12, which left all those good defensive players on the board for the defensive needy teams. And so it just, he dropped because of that. But I think he's a big winner in this draft because where would you rather go? Would you rather go to the Jets to play with that cast of quarterbacks, or would you rather go to Tampa and play with Jameis Winston?
I mean, you got Jameis. I mean, you got a great offense with Jameis and that receiving core. Yep. Now the Bucs didn't go. I mean, they took one running back in the 5th round, but he's not going to. I mean, apparently, from what I'm hearing, the kid from the guy that we're talking about, who's been on the outs in Tampa, he's not on the outs. He's actually looking better.
Who's that?
Who's the running back in Tampa?
Doug Martin. No, I thought you were talking receiver. Doug Martin. Yeah.
He's actually gaining ground in Tampa as coming back and being better than he was last year.
A 3-game suspension with all the guaranteed money voided off your contract can motivate you in amazing ways.
Make up my mind, would you guys, please? I mean, granted, there's nobody really else on the team that can run like Martin. If Martin is at 100%. He's one of the top 10 backs in the NFL. If he could, in my opinion. All right. So second round, they went Justin Evans, a safety out of Texas A&M. Another good pick by the Buccaneers. They need the secondary help, and this kid's going to be 6 foot, 199. He's aggressive. He's fast. He's a good pick for the Buccaneers.
Yeah, because, I mean, they don't need him to lead their secondary. They need a piece back there, and he's a guy that can be a piece that could develop into a very good starter. So I thought that was a good pick. And Godwin was my favorite one in the 3rd round. I couldn't believe he lasted that long. I had him going at the top of the 2nd. I think he had 11 touchdowns. And I like the pick analysis by Charles Davis. Basketball on grass.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
This offense is a 500-point offense waiting to happen. Jeremy Nichols in the 5th round gives them some insurance in case Doug Martin is not still doing as well in August. So I think they did really good in this draft.
Yeah, I like that Godwin pick too. I mean, he's going to complement Mike Evans greatly on one side or the other, or maybe even in the slot, depending on what Jackson does. I liked Tampa's draft. What kind of grade do you give it?
I'll give it an 8.5. I don't think I'll give it a 9. I don't think it was quite as good as New Orleans draft, but it was really, really close. And with all the impact offensive players they added, like I said, they went from a team with only Mike Evans and Cameron Brate to a team with just a slew of weapons. It's a 500-point offense waiting to happen. It's exciting times in Tampa. If you're a Tampa fan, you got to be happy with what's going on.
Yep. All right, Derek, I think we're going to save the West for next week. Okay. So we'll save the divisions in the AFC and NFC West for next week. We've gotten through 6 of the 8 divisions. 6 of the 8? Yeah, 6 of the 8 divisions in the last 2 weeks. You've got 2 more weeks with us, so we'll just save those 2 divisions next week. Hopefully, Elliot will be back. So any news that has come out of the NFL this week that we want to touch on before we get out of here, or that you can think of? I mean, there hasn't been too much going on, really.
Well, Jay Cutler retired and took a job with Fox Sports. I don't think we were talking about that last week.
No, we weren't. We weren't. And, he's as much as I dislike Jay Cutler as a quarterback, he does have knowledge of the game. I don't know what he's going to bring to the booth. He's got the personality of wet paper. So, and you live in Chicago. You know what Jay Cutler's like. You know how he's acted in Chicago and the way he's treated people in Chicago. What kind of impact do you think he's going to have in the booth?
He's going to be on the second team, so he's announcing team behind Buck and Aikman. So he's going to have a chance, to be surrounded with a good crew that he can give some good analysis. I'll give 2 stories about Cutler that I think kind of sum up his run in Chicago. One was when they had an autographed football that they were trying to auction off for a charity. They couldn't even get $100 for the football, and so like an organizer of it ended up buying it, I think, for $100, and they gave it to their kid. When you're the starting quarterback in Chicago and you're the all-time franchise leader in passing yards and touchdowns, and you can't even get $100 for your football at a charity event, that kind of tells you where you're at with fans as far as what they think of him. And my other favorite story with him is there's a lady that I did some business with downtown in Chicago who was out with her boyfriend one night at a restaurant in the Loop. And they didn't know anything about sports at all, and they like food, and so they're sitting there taking pictures of their food and Snapchatting them and stuff like that. Also, this guy comes over and starts screaming at them to stop taking pictures, and what are they doing? And they're just like deers in headlight. They're just kind of looking like, what's going on? And so then all of a sudden this guy kind of realized that they didn't know who he was, and so he went back and sat down, and they asked their waiter, they're like, who is that guy? What's he yelling at us about? That's Jay Cutler. Now, I don't know if that story is 100% true, but this was one of the most – would have a really hard time believing she made that up. She knew nothing about sports. She just heard me talking about football all the time and told me the story because she thought I'd think it was cool, and she couldn't even hardly remember who his name was before she told me. I don't doubt that story at all. He needs to bring a more human element to the booth where he's going to be relatable. Otherwise, I don't think he's going to have much of a future in that, because you can't have that type of attitude on camera.
Well, he's going to be in a 3-man booth to start so he can get his feet wet, unlike Tony Romo on CBS, where he's going into the primetime top slot with Jim Nantz right off the bat.
Right.
But Romo at least has a personality.
Yes. Yeah, he reminds me of Favre. They both played the game the same way as far as that gunslinger mentality. Yeah. And off the field, they were just kind of this happy-go-lucky kid that was just happy to be in the NFL.
And I think that's gonna translate very well into the broadcast booth. Whereas Jay Cutler, he could be a good guy. I don't know, but I'm not a big fan of Jay Cutler. He had so much promise coming out of Vanderbilt and into the NFL. And he just fell flat on his face. First in Denver and then in Chicago. He had a couple of great seasons, but who knows? I'm sure he has a lot of knowledge about the game itself, and he can bring a lot of knowledge to the booth. But what kind of personality is he going to be? Because it's a totally. You don't have to be in a football field. You don't have to worry about your voice as far as talking about, well, this is what they were doing here and this is what we're doing here. Getting him in the broadcast booth, I'm just curious to see how that's going to work out. I mean, if he doesn't work out, like I said, he's the 3-man booth. If he doesn't work, they can toss him aside, but they need to find someone to replace John Lynch. John Lynch going to San Francisco was a big loss for Fox Sports because John Lynch was a great color commentator.
Yes, he was.
And I'm sorry, John Lynch, as biased as I am with the Browns, John Lynch won the draft with that second pick in the first round.
Yep.
I think
he pulled off that move like he was a savvy GM that had been in the league for 10 years.
Yeah, I think he played some poker with the Bears, and he just pulled off, and he ended up getting 4 picks he wouldn't have had otherwise. So it was good for him. Cutler going to the booth, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the best comparison for him is I think he's kind of the modern day Jeff George is who Cutler translates well to. Because if you look at his passing numbers, I think he's 35th all time in touchdown passes and he's 37th in passing yards. So to say that, he fell flat on his face or he was a bust, the stats say that he's one of the more prolific passers that the game's ever seen. He had one of the strongest arms that the game ever seen. But there's a difference between being a good thrower and a good quarterback. Right. And Jay Cutler was a good thrower. Jeff George was a good thrower. But all those intangible things you look for, like on third down, the fourth quarter, when the game's on the line, elevating teammates so that they sit there and play better than what they thought they could. Right. He had absolutely none of that. He only made the playoffs one time in his career in 2010 with an elite defense where they were 30th in yards gained. He only had one 4,000-yard passing season. He never had 30 passing touchdowns in a season, despite playing with guys like Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal early in his career. You can't say that his career met expectations. No. Given all his physical talents. He reminds me of Jeff George.
Jeff George was a gunslinger as well. He had a cannon of an arm, but he had nothing between the ears.
There's a lot of people that said Jeff George had a faster release than Dan Marino.
Yeah,
and Dan Marino had one of the fastest releases in the history of the league.
Yeah, I actually saw Jeff. I had the pleasure of seeing Jeff George play in person. And it was phenomenal. It was amazing to see. I mean, he was playing for Minnesota at the time, and they came to Tampa, and I watched them on a Monday night game. And the guy the release on that kid was something else. Yep. But that was later in his career, but Jeff George had so much. He was a number 1 draft pick, I think it was number 1 overall with the Colts, wasn't he?
He was the number 1 pick overall at the Colts. He wore his welcome out there. His best seasons were probably in Atlanta in 95, and then he had that good season in Minnesota in 99. But I was going to look at this real quick. If I remember right, I think Jeff George has more passing yards in his career than Troy Aikman. I want to make sure that's right.
Troy had a lot of other weapons other than Michael Irvin too. He had Emmitt Smith. When you get Emmitt Smith in your backfield, I mean, come on.
No, he actually didn't. Aikman had 32,000 and Jeff George had 27,000. I think what it was is the touchdowns because Aikman didn't have many touchdowns in his career where George was just prolific.
Well, he was the quarterback. He had Randy Moss on that team and couldn't do anything with it.
He led the league in passing yards in Oakland in 97 after he left Atlanta. And that's the thing. He put up some good numbers, but his career record was 46-78 as a starter. I mean, he just never did anything that translated to winning in the NFL other than that good year in Atlanta and that good year in Minnesota.
Yep. All right, Derek, you've got a dinner to go to.
I do. My girlfriend got a new job today, and so we're going to go out and celebrate her new job. All
right, well, go enjoy your girlfriend. And if you see Nick, tell him Mazel Tov, congratulations on the baby coming. I didn't know until today that he was having a baby. Maybe you said it in the chat. I maybe overlooked it and didn't notice it, but tell him send him my best. And we will see you next Wednesday on the Nerds Network. 2 more shows to go.
2 more shows to go.
And we'll cover the last two divisions this week, and then the last one will be just like a free for all. We'll figure out what to do at the time. Hopefully,
we never have a problem finding something to talk about.
We never have an issue finding stuff to talk about. And for you hockey fans, since Ron wasn't here tonight, remember there are 2 Game 7s tonight on the ice, and of course there's a couple of basketball games I think tonight too. But enjoy the playoffs. And Derek, thank you again for your time. We'll see you
Thanks
next Wednesday. And we appreciate it. And on behalf of the nerds, have a good night. Peace. We're out of here.